Hello, welcome everyone. I would like to start our workshop. I would like to start by very briefly introducing our broader project to you, and then I will introduce our instructor for today, and we will start then. So the broader project is EC Founder Tuning Project in collaboration with 3 universities, Koç University, University of Amsterdam, and Pompeu Fabra University from Barcelona. And the focus of the project is primarily intends to bridge migration and urban studies in research, but beyond being a research project, it also aims to increase networking among early career researchers and to increase the institutional capacities of 3 partner universities. So Broader also offers scientific and research management training activities like this one to young researchers and to graduate students, including research proposal management skills and also key transferable skills. So today's workshop on article writing is part of the scientific activities of Broader to provide early career academics with a ground to improve their skills in writing, editing, and publishing journal articles. And our instructor, Professor Jan Rath, is one of the 3 principal investigators of Broader Project. He's Professor Emeritus of Sociology in the Department of Sociology in the University of Amsterdam. He has been a researcher at the Center for Urban Studies and the Institute for Migration and Ethnic Studies of the Amsterdam Institute for Social Science Research. And he is the chair of Metropolis International. He's also one of the managing editors of International Migration, together with also Professor Ahmet İçduygu, our other PI of Broader Project. And Professor Rath is currently editor of International Journal of Entrepreneurial Behavior and Research, advisory editor of the International Migration Review, associate editor of the Journal of International Migration and Integration, and editor of Solidarity and Identity series of the Amsterdam University Press. So I will now leave the floor to Professor Jan Rath, and I wish you, all of you, a great workshop.
Oh. Okay, you're muted.
Stand, but when I'm standing, my head is unavailable. So, yeah, I will see. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this nice introduction, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come to Istanbul again and to meet with you and talk about my experiences as a writer and an editor of text. And so I want to share with you some of my experiences, and I hope that's the elements that can be of use for you. The topic is article writing, but I thought it's not good to start with article writing. Actually, we should start in a more broader way. Why the hell do we publish? Why the hell do we want to publish, and what forms do we have available? So I will go through that, and then at the end, or sort of halfway, we will arrive at the article writing thing. And there's a couple of things that I think you should keep in mind. At least I would recommend you would keep in mind. And then when we go through it, that at some point I'm done with my presentation. And then I think it's time for you here or far away to raise your points or questions, and then we'll talk about it. So that's sort of how I thought we do this. So the structure of my presentation is very simple. First of all, publishing. Why and for whom do we want to publish? What are academic expectations? And that's not just the expectations of academic quality, but it's also about what's the role of publishing in the world of academia. The societal expectations. I mean, most of our work is sponsored by taxpayers, and that involves that we have a responsibility vis-a-vis the taxpayer, vis-a-vis society, or maybe even particular purposes that we find important. I will touch upon the importance, the extreme importance of developing your own communication and dissemination plan. So you don't just start writing. That's not true. Many people do it. But what you should have done is to start with thinking about, why do I want to publish, for whom, which trajectories, which outlets, and so on and so forth. And then I will finally arrive at publishing. I will say a bit about book publishing, although I don't want to spend too much time on it because that's a different thing. And then I will go into the issue of article writing. And of course, as always, there's time for questions. If there are urgent questions, because you don't understand me, or I say something very incomprehensible, interrupt me immediately. But if not, then we can do this sort of later during this afternoon. There's time till 5 o'clock. That is 5 o'clock Istanbul time. And there will be a break halfway. I don't know when halfway is, but you will inform me about that. And then we'll see where we are. So if that's all right with you, then I will continue. Well, why do we publish, and for whom do we do that? Well, first of all, we are part of the academia. We're part of science, social science in particular. And it's essential for any science to be open, to be dynamic, and to be controllable. So when we make an academic claim, it's important that we share that with others so that they learn from your findings, but also that other people, our peers or whoever, are able to check on the basis of what you are saying that, or to check to what discussion or debate you are contributing. And so that's why we need to have an open sphere in which publishing should be possible. And we should be able to publish about each and every topic. There are no rules or restrictions. In practice, there are, for all sorts of reasons. But in principle, we should have an open environment in which anything can be discussed. And I'm convinced that this is the only way to advance the social sciences. Communication and dissemination of research findings, so that's what we're talking about, or reflecting on it, is essential, not just for individuals. It's essential for science in general, and for the reasons that I just explained. It's important to to further develop the existing knowledge, to reflect on existing knowledge, or to think, well, A, B, and C discovered this, so they claim that, but the conditions under which they carried out their research is a bit iffy, in my humble opinion, so I will do it better. I will have a better perspective, or I'll have a perspective that was not regarded relevant, but I will demonstrate that it's relevant. So that also means that whatever we find, it's always temporary. That our knowledge is not there for eternity, although when I wake up in the morning and I think, I really hope that I wrote something where I make claims that will stay in the world and continue to be influential. But that's nonsense. It doesn't exist. Just look at the way you yourself work. I'm pretty sure that most of your publications, most of the publications you refer to in your papers are very recent, as if in 1977 or 64 or 1948 there were no relevant findings. Well, maybe they were not relevant, but how do you know? You first need to read them before making such a decision. Personally, I think that there are many relevant things. I very often hear people say, well, there's something innovative, and then I think, because I have the advantage, well, this time it's an advantage to be somewhat older. I think I've seen that. I've been there, done that in 1982. And so there was also a repetition of innovations that are not innovative at all. But okay, that's sort of these are the comments of a grumpy old man. So communication, free communication and dissemination is relevant for science in general. But it's also relevant for our funders. So the broader project as Jaren kindly introduced, is sponsored by the European Commission. They want to see results, and they want to see the results offered in the right way. And next to that, we promise to deliver results. So they will check whether we deliver. Funders find it increasingly important to publish. I know that, say, 30 years ago, when you would get money from, say, the National Research Foundation, you get money and good luck. You can do with it whatever you want. We will notice if there is an outcome and everything is fine. That is no longer the case. I'm from the Netherlands. I know that the Dutch Research Council, a bit like the European Research Council, and I'm sure very much like many other research councils, they are willing, if you have a good plan and you have a good CV, etc., everything is feasible, innovative, cutting edge. But they also want to see, before they make a final decision to allocate the money to you, what do you do with the results? How do you share your findings? What efforts do you make to reach out to various publics? So for funders, it's increasingly important that we publish, that we share our findings in whatever way possible. For the universities, it's important too. Of course, as individual researchers, you want to do what you're supposed to do, or you're ambitious. I will come to that in a minute. But we're all part of a wider community, whether it's a center like Koç here in Istanbul or any other center for urban studies. We're part of a department, we're part of the university, and all these institutions are being evaluated. Every year they need to show their credentials and their performance, and that's collected by a more senior kind of institution, and they draw conclusions. So when you're in a department where hardly anybody publishes, there is a tendency among academics to say, it's not so good. It's a teaching university. Nothing wrong with that. We need teaching universities. In fact, for most people, they are extremely important. But when you're in the field of research, you don't want to be dependent on those type of universities only. So it plays a role in the profile of universities, in the type of fields that universities want to be strong at, and in the competition with universities compete. We have these rankings and so on and so forth. It's important for society, and that holds particularly true for social sciences. Well, in fact, for any kind of science, but we go into the field. So social science doesn't take place here, so in and around our laptops. No, it's over there, it's out there. There's something going on that we find interesting, we want to understand and explain it. And we talk to people, we interview them, we go to archives, whatever. And it's important that we share our findings to the people who were so kind to offer us time and the knowledge on the basis of which we have been able to write all these fantastic documents. So it's important to think about that. Yeah, so when I just did a research project on a shopping street in the southern part of Rotterdam, and I could write a paper. Don't have that ambition, but I could write a paper, send it to a high-end academic journal published in the United States, and if accepted, the university would say, fantastic, because it's high impact, it's very good, but it's totally useless for the people whom I observed and whom I interviewed. And I think it's important, I think it's part of my responsibility to let them know what I found. Whether they like it or not, that's not important. It's important that they know that it makes sense to spend time with an academic from another city. Another city is a bit strange, but that's another issue. Yeah. And last but not least, it's important for individual researchers. So for you and for me, it's important. It's yesterday. I was sitting on, I'm a member of the board of trustees, and we are searching a new rector of the school organizations. And I got their CVs, less than 2 pages. Well, if most of you are junior, but my CV is 30 pages. That doesn't mean that I'm smarter, but my publications, anything that I did, my PhD supervision, it's all listed here. So it's part of my profile. And we are in a world in which we cannot take our academic position for granted. We are, at least most of us are paid, or at least we hope to be paid. And we hope to be paid in a tenured position, or a position that looks a bit like a tenured position. But it's all based on our credentials. So we need to build a strong profile. And a publication track record shows who you are, what type of research you do, how ambitious you are, how savvy you are in finding the right outlets. So that tells something about you as an individual researcher. And it tells the director or the professor or the dean or whoever makes decisions about hiring new staff, we need to have that person and certainly not that person. And that's to a large extent, not entirely, but to a large extent done based on your profile, your CV. And CV is to a large extent publications. So for us, it's important to publish. It's also important because through publications, in whatever form, we communicate with others. So we get feedback. And it's also a kind of marketing. So when I publish a paper in a Turkish journal, it would be a miracle because my Turkish is not so good. But if I would do that with your help, Rath, then people notice my work and they think, oh, that's interesting. So maybe I should send a message and let's have a conversation. And you never know what comes out of that conversation. Or they think, yeah, interesting, but not my cup of tea. So it also sorts out with whom you talk, what kind of academic groups or subgroups you become part of. It's like your business cards, but a very big one in that sense. There's a few things that I added. So for us, publishing or creating a certain track record in publications tells something about your performance. And it's and in some countries, it's very important. In some countries, you get funding for research on the basis of your performance. So if you don't publish, you don't get funding for research, or at least only a little bit. And that means that your research career is dead. You don't want that. So there is an urgency to continue publishing. It tells something about the career trajectories that you aspire, or at least that you have been doing. It impacts your research time. I just said in some countries, it's almost like going to a supermarket. Right? So you bought a can of beer and two bottles of iron. So you get so many hours of research time. And if you have more publication, you get a bottle of Rath extra. Well, I'm saying it in a joking way, but again, in some countries, it is what it is, and very directly, but it can also be indirect. And it also impacts funding opportunities. So when you apply after your postdoc trajectory for a European Research Council grant, and keep in mind that's extremely prestigious. Only the best 5% are being funded. So it's competitive, but it means that you need to be competitive. If you want to successfully apply, you need to have an excellent plan, an innovative plan, a plan that's internationally rounded, and so on and so forth. But you also need to have a CV. Your CV is part of the evaluation. I was involved in that evaluation, and for 30-40% it counts. So it's bloody relevant. That also means, but that's a topic for a different workshop, writing a CV is not just giving a list of publications. In a CV, they want to show your leadership. You say, well, I've never been a director. No, but you can still have leadership qualities. You need to find a way to describe it. But that's another issue. In a CV, but how do you know as a funder or as a committee working on behalf of a funder that this application is written by somebody who belongs to the top 5% of the European research area? Well, you want to know that somebody is publishing in that area. That means you don't only publish in Bulgarian or in Dutch. I can be world famous in the Netherlands. Who cares? Or in Turkish. You need to have an international track record, and a track record that is accessible by people from different communities. For individual research, there could be a few other reasons. It feels good to publish. Like I said, I want to make a point, and I want to make that point, and I will do it here, and I will publish about it. That could be political things, and if you want to show your credentials, and you want to show that you care, and that you have the knowledge, and that you are a good person. There's nothing wrong with that. That's I think many people have that aspiration, some more than others, some too much, others not enough, and so on. And finally, I mentioned showboating. I can publish. When I was the head of department in Amsterdam, I had an interview with one of our senior staff members, and he showed his publication track record in 1 year. Keep in mind, in Amsterdam, the expectation is, say, 2 high-impact articles per year, 2. He had published 10. And I said, why the hell do you publish 10 papers? I mean, is that really better than 2? It's sort of milking, how do you call that? And diluting the impact of your research. It's focusing on numbers, not on content. And because personally, I don't believe that people can really write 10 high-impact papers in 1 year. And it's not 1 year, it's only a part, because you also need to teach and do other things. So it's, and I think for that person, it's sort of, yeah, it's apparently there is a drive to show that he is good, and good in terms of capable of banging out large numbers. Well, it's like with McDonald's, large numbers of hamburgers. It doesn't mean that they are good quality. Yeah, I keep that in mind. All right. So we're talking about the expectations in academia. Well, it's clear that things in academia today are very different from things 20, 30, 40 years ago, let alone before that. We're increasingly involved in an international world. Students, staff members are encouraged to reach out to the rest of the world, to embark on exchanges, to collaborate internationally. I mean, the very fact that I'm here to teach that is just one example thereof. And it's part of a wider system in which universities compete with each other. And there is a cutthroat international competition. This competition is how to say that, is visible in multiple ways. Think about the rankings. My colleague, I haven't met one single colleague ever in my life who said these rankings are very important. Nobody says that. But everybody is really interested in knowing where are we this year. So apparently there is something that matters. And let's face it, when you collaborate, say, for a European grant with a university that's number 1200 on the international ranking, that's less interesting than collaborating with an institute that's part of the top 10. So apparently, whether we like it or not, and maybe we don't like it, but it does matter in one way or another. And publications are important there. The number, the type of publications, they matter. In many countries in Europe, but not just in Europe, also in other advanced economies, new standards have been developed to measure and evaluate output, quality, and also to assess competitivity. And that's happening both at the level of individual researchers, institutions, and countries. So you're working in the university department, at least you aspire to be working there. You start at the bottom. You're a junior university academic or an assistant professor, whatever you call it. And you want to move up. At least I never meet somebody who thinks, I don't want to move up. I'm fine. The contrary is true. Most people think, well, I already moved up, but it hasn't been discovered yet by the head of the department, but I deserve to move up. So people want to become an associate professor, full professor, but everybody wants it. And it's not possible, it's not affordable to nominate every individual staff member as a full professor. So there's competition. And you need to find ways to select who deserves promotion and who does not yet deserve it. Publications matter. It's not just publication, there's much more to it, but they matter. But the same is happening at the institutional level. And so there is sort of universities, they look at each other and they compare each other, or departments do, or centers do. And at the level of countries, the same is happening. It tells something about the quality of research, the international reputation of academia. And it's all sort of, it translates into multiple reviews, performance reviews. The other rankings already mentioned it. The bibliographic systems that some people are able to measure in a very advanced way. And I don't buy that crap, but many people do. That you can sort of measure the impact of journals or the relevance of individuals. Well, impact scores, I touch upon that. Citation indices. So is there anybody here who did not check his or her citation score? We all have, right? Yeah, of course, because you want to know, does it matter? You found something, you think it's important, it's unique, but you also want to know, have people noticed my brilliant work? And when you see that it's going up, and you get an H index, and the number is increasing too, you like that, because it tells something about you, and you have the feeling, I'm doing something good. So I'm a good academic, and we all want to be good academics. So these elements matter. And they're part of the academic world in which we are involved in. But there's some flip sides. So there is this slogan, publish or perish. So if you don't publish, you perish. You're fucked. You're a loser. And maybe there are good reasons not to publish. I had a colleague. He didn't publish a lot in a number of years, and that would be a reason to ask questions. And it turned out he was writing a book, for a great academic publisher from the US. So there are good reasons not to publish, or at least to slow down the publications. Yeah, but publishing, if you don't publish enough or not in the right way, and I already touched upon that, you slow down your academic career, because there are other people who do, and they are your competitors, and they take your place. I'll come back to that. Well, no, just one thing. So I'm not trying to say that your academic career is totally dependent on publishing. I'm trying to say publishing is very important, and publishing in the right way, very important. But when you want to be part of an academic community, you want to have a good position in a university, or to be in a good position to successfully apply for funding, then you need to do other things as well. Teaching, for starters, because the universities are first of all teaching institutions, and sort of serving the community, and both the community outdoors, but also your colleagues. They're doing stuff in a department. Somebody needs to be chairing the department. A lousy job, but somebody needs to do it. We need to have somebody who chairs the examination committee or the program board, and then what have you. So those things need to be done. And I've seen folks in departments who sort of manage to stay out of there. And consequently, they have much more time to publish. So their publication track record looks much better. But I think it's a lousy colleague, and he or she don't deserve to be promoted. But not everybody is looking at it in that way. And there's a final point. So this rat race, this competition, is it leads to how to say that, the feeling that is never good enough. Now you think I published 2 articles, but in your head you think, but I could have published 3 or 10, and that's not good. But to be ambitious is good, but at some point you need to be satisfied. And again, with the example of the guy who published 10 articles in 1 year, if he would have dedicated his time on just 2 papers, but then 2 very good papers, rather than 10 average papers, I think he would have served us much better. Because there's nobody here in this room who is capable of keeping track of everything that's been published. It drives me nuts. So I stop. I try to keep track. I try to keep track of what's being published. So I get these alerts from publishers, but I can't even keep track of that, let alone of reading these papers. And that's a bit sad. I mean, it's a waste of time. And if you look at these overviews of impact of journals, some articles are read by 6 people. There's not much. There's not much. And consequently, there have been more recently calls for what's called slow science. So we need to stop that rat race. We need to calm down, take more time to reflect or to do something else. And certainly in Amsterdam, this is very popular. And there were these evaluations by by international evaluation committees, and they support that. The only point is nobody does it. I'm in favor of slow science, but first I need to publish this. So that's apparently how it goes. Then, apart from academic expectation, there's societal expectation. So we want to contribute to society. Many of us, maybe not here, but many academics have a sense that they have something to say about what's going on out there. And we need to serve the community, or we need to contribute to policy making. Not in a way like slaves working, but we need to critically follow government and give recommendations how to improve. Which I think there's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that each and every research lends itself for those purposes, but there's nothing wrong with it. But there is something that we need to keep in mind, that even when we are invited or we are forced by funders to come up with policy recommendations, it's very likely that they are ignored. And I'm already telling you, so be it. Don't get frustrated. I've met too many people who said, yeah, and I gave that policy recommendation and they ignore it. And I think, yeah, of course, why would they? Because you are not the only big person that the government is waiting for. No, so the parliament is in a state of limbo. We don't know what to do, but professor is coming with a publication. That's not how it works. It's an ongoing thing in which lots of people, lots of institutions are involved. And those kind of policy decisions are very time consuming. And we are only one part of it. And besides, it's possible that you come up with a brilliant idea, you speak to the government, it's being ignored, but 20 years later, suddenly it's discovered that was actually an interesting idea. So let's pursue it. And by then you're dead. Yeah. So the policy process is influenced by a host of factors. I mean, the media play a role. Journalists can be much more important than academia. Political parties, lobby groups, oil companies, I think they're much more influential when it's about environmental policies than the entire university. The legal concerns, sometimes what we want, what we recommend, is legally impossible. So our role is limited. And it's partly due to the fact that the government is only interested in solving social problems. But social problems, as we would define it, is not the same as the social problems that the government is focusing on. There could be urgent social problems, but the government is not interested. It doesn't acknowledge issues as a social problem, so politically it doesn't exist. So there you go with your policy recommendations about the solving of that social problem. So for a long time, and to some extent still, labor market racism is not a social problem. I think it's a serious social problem, but the government, political parties, the media, they only are interested in extreme cases, but not slower systematic forms of exclusion. And when it's not acknowledged as such, it's very difficult to influence a policy because there's no policy that you can influence. What plays a role is that the zillions of social problems, or zillions of issues that compete with each other to be acknowledged as a social problem. And in that competition, lots of things disappear. And it's like, well, it's important, but not today, because we have other issues. We need to solve the environmental challenges or the consequence of the war in Ukraine. So I'm sorry, labor market racism, that's something we will take care another time. We also need to take account with the capacity of the government. I mean, you can say whatever you want, and even if you find, say, a minister or a deputy minister or a deputy mayor willing to pay time to it, his or her staff only has limited time, or there's limited funding. So there's only so much you can do. So this, I'm just saying this to sort of relativize our ambition. The carrying capacity, as it's been described, to deal with issues, to address issues, is limited. And subsequently, our influence is limited too. Right. In that hodgepodge with all these sort of external forces, there's you and me. And we are involved in research and we want to write something. We get an invitation to contribute a paper to whatever. What do? I think, no, I'm not thinking, I'm convinced that it's important that each of you takes sufficient time to think about what you want. What kind of communication and dissemination strategy do you have in mind? And so that you can take it for granted. And frankly, that's what I did when I was much younger. But I think it's important to think about. There are many issues that you need to sort of reflect on. If you don't do that, maybe you're a happier person. That's possible. But it also means that there's a risk that you do things that you later regret. Where you think, well, I spent a lot of time with this, but why not? So what I did, just to give you an example. So when I was a PhD student, postdoc, I was in that position too many years ago. I was very much intrigued to be invited to contribute to books. Well, I thought a book it's a book. You can go to the library or to a bookstore. I never found any of my books in the bookstore, but theoretically it's thinkable. I can show it to my parents or to my mother. On the shelves at home where you can display it. So that's nice. Let's face it, it's nice, but it's useless. With some books, a few hundred copies being not being read because they are bought by libraries, so they exist. So what's the point? And today, if I would have to restart my career, I would invest much more in articles. Not that articles are fundamentally better, not necessarily, but they reach people in an easier way. Maybe this is becoming an old-fashioned way of looking. That's not impossible. But the point is, you have to think about it. If I would have thought about it and thought more about, it's nice to have a book with a colored picture on the front that I could show to my parents. That's not a real valid argument. I mean, it's nice, but it doesn't support my career. So you need to think more fundamentally. And then it's about things, so what purposes do you want to serve? So why do you publish? Why are you doing it? And for some people, it's clear that they want to have an academic career, but other people, they say, no, I want to serve the community. So I need to publish my findings so that the people who deserve it get my knowledge. That leads to a different type of publication. And so that's why you need to do it. How do you want to be seen? As somebody who is hardly publishing or publishing a lot, or only publishing internationally, or how do you want to be seen and how do you want to be recognized by others? Those are elements. There's a few possibilities. You could say, well, I want to be seen as a good researcher, somebody who's solid. That's it. Or do you want to be seen as somebody who is in the theoretical vanguard? It's sort of not very academically, but sort of empirically, but somebody who is very strong in theory, and you want to stay in that scene. That means that the people out there on the street will hardly notice what you are doing. But there is a space for that type of public, but it's a different type of different profile. Do you want to be seen as a specialist, somebody who knows a lot about a minuscule topic, or the other way around, somebody who knows a bit about many different topics and who is able to combine it? Here at Koç, many of us are migration specialists. Is that what we want? Is that the be-all and end-all, or is there more going on? Do we need to engage with other disciplines, with sub-disciplines? And once you think about it, that impacts the choices that you make. Do you want to be, thirdly, seen as policy scientist, or somebody who is a public sociology, who's speaking in a way that when you open the newspapers, you're there. Opening the newspapers doesn't mean that you are say that you will get a Nobel Prize for sociology, but you are being noticed. It's a different role that you may assume. So those are choices that you want to think about. It boils down to a number of questions. Which publics do you want to serve? Maybe you say, I can't choose. I want to do two things. Fair enough. But that has consequences. in which languages? Do you want to publish in Turkish only? Well, then you're world famous in Turkey. But outside Turkey, nobody knows what you've been doing. Same holds for me. I'm from the Netherlands. You can count the number of people who speak Dutch well, not on one hand, but it's only a few people. So if I really want to have impact, I need to publish internationally, which is unpleasant, because it's not my own language. It takes more effort. And if I would publish in English only, then I would lose my connection with the people that I study. So those are consequences. Which forms and style? I'll come back to that momentarily. All right. It was a start here. So, okay. So once we have thought about our communication and dissemination plan, and to be sure, I would recommend not to focus on written outlets only, giving presentations. Communicate in an informal way with policymakers. Engage with advocacy groups. I mean, those are also forms, or join a political party. Those are also forms of sharing your findings. That should be part of it. Well, what we want, we know what we want. We have different forms, and here I mainly focus on written things. So you're commissioned by the European Commission to do a research, and you write a report. That's it, and you've done your job. So that, I mean, you want to be a policy scientist. That's heaven for you, because you did what you were supposed to do. Or you write a book. Publishing books is actually very difficult. It's very costly. You have to deal with the hurdles that publishers erupt. And keep in mind, publishers are not very much, they are not solely interested in academic relevance or quality. They need to sell the book. It's not black and white, but they need to sell the book, so they have a different way of looking. If they say, now we can't publish it, that doesn't mean that you wrote a lousy book. Now, maybe you did, but you can't judge that on the basis of a no. You can write a blog. I really find blogs interesting because they are short. Some blogs only have 800 words, so it's a quickie. The runtime is also short, so you don't have to wait for 2 years before you finally have a publication. It could be a matter of weeks or days. So that's nice. It's not an academic paper. It means that the requirements don't apply, or at least don't apply in the same way, which is nice. Yeah, so you have more freedom to do it. And because most blogs are free, they spread very quickly. So I had a master student from Iran, and he was interested, like me, in coffee bars, and he wrote a small text for an urban studies blog, 800 words about coffee bars in Tehran. The next day, he was quoted in The Guardian. If he would have published the same paper, well, at least the same argument in an academic journal, The Guardian wouldn't have noticed it. So, is it important to be quoted by The Guardian? Well, it depends on what you want, but it's nice. At least your message is spreading. Only 800 words. I mean, you need more time to drink a coffee. At least I need more time. So, and you can experiment. You say, well, my idea, which is true. Yeah. So there's an indirect influence. Yeah. You can have ideas. You say, I'm not entirely sure, but I want to write it. I want to make that point. And then you get feedback, or you don't get feedback, but at least you can sort of test things. When you want to be more targeted, you could write, at least try to write an op-ed for a newspaper. And newspapers are sometimes really interesting. Of course, it means that you need to write in a different way. That's another issue. You can write a policy brief, a short document, summarizing what you found, connecting it to policy debates, and give recommendations. Podcasts, a documentary on TV, give a presentation of sorts, or you write an article in an academic journal, anything else. So there's not one way, of sharing your findings. There are multiple instruments, and in practice, you don't choose one. You do various things simultaneously. Okay, where are we in terms of time? Okay, so I skipped the book thing. My slides will be shared, I suppose. So there is a few things on the book. You need to have a publisher. So how do you get a publisher? That is, first you write a synopsis, so a short version that is attractive, to the point, and you send it. So I will now focus on articles. Well, the number one question that you need to address when you want to write an article is, why the hell am I doing this? What point do I want to make? What would be my original contribution? And I emphasize original. So you can say, well, I've been studying refugees and the reception in a small town. You can publish about it, but why would you do that? Because there's zillions of others who have already done that. So what new knowledge can you add? I'm not fantasizing this. I'm one of the editors of International Migration, and I read a lot of those papers that are very similar. And I'm really thinking, why the hell am I reading this? What's new? I've done a lot of work on migrant entrepreneurship, and at some point I got so fed up with it because it's the same. It's the same. So why am I reading it? Why am somebody investing so much time in writing what I already know? So that means if you want to write a good paper, and if you want to write a paper that has higher chance of being accepted, you need to think about your point, your innovative point. And a point, it sounds strange, but it's a point. So you can say, well, I'm writing about gentrification. That's not a point. It's like a stain, but a point is that you have a particular idea, a particular theoretical notion that you can summarize in one sentence, okay, 2 sentences, that is sharp and that speaks to an academic debate. And this is the number one question that you need to address. And you need to take time to seriously reflect on it. It sounds so self-evident, and you think, of course, yeah, but what next? No, you really need to take time to do that, and be able to explain to people who are not in your field what your original contribution is. What is the knowledge that didn't exist before you entered the field? And to make it clear, when you say, well, I'm interested in the reception of immigrants in a mid-sized town in Turkey, and you say, well, we have these studies in Kahramanmaraş and in Yozgat, but not yet in Denizli. That's not interesting, because that's like collecting butterflies. We have an orange butterfly and a blue one and a brown one, but we miss the yellow one. Fair enough. I mean, for people in Denizli, it's interesting, but for the academic community, it's not, because there is no new knowledge. It's just more of the same. So try to be ambitious and think more fundamentally. I'm really emphasizing this point because that's what I often miss. Next. Yeah,
Hasn't everything been said in that manner? Because it feels like that. So how to find that contribution? Because
yeah. Well,
That's the
of course,
challenge, I
yeah,
know.
that's the challenge. That's the challenge. It could be a new way of thinking, or criticizing an existing way and showing that by taking this as a starting point, you miss that. And if you can't find it, then what's the purpose of writing? I'm sort of overstating this, but in practice, and don't expect fundamental changes. So you say, well, I want to develop a new theoretical idea. Nobody expects you to be the new Pierre Bourdieu. It doesn't. It could be a very small thing, saying that, well, let's say the reception of refugees, the role of institutions, it's important, but you found, yeah, but it's a particular role, or it's only under certain circumstances is that role being fulfilled. That adds something to that knowledge. Yeah. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But you need to think about it before you write. You don't start writing and then while writing you think about it. No, that's too late. That's too late. I once was invited to write a paper for a conference on migrant entrepreneurship and education. Not at all easy. Because it's clear that there is a connection between self-employment and education. And when you are highly employed, you enter different sectors, so the chance of being successful is higher. And so I was writing that, and then after 4 pages, I already wrote it, and I said, but that I've nothing else. So I didn't have a good point. I hadn't thought my point, my arguments, good enough. And that led to a terrible presentation, but anyway. Okay, choose a journal. And here, I mean, and this comes back to your communication and dissemination plan. Here you need to think thoroughly. Most of us are in the field of migration studies. So there's a tendency, well, we go to the Journal of Ethical Migration Study, to international migration. To international migration, we review ethical racial studies, identities, whatever. But I don't see any reason why we should do that. Because what we do is not migration studies. We are in social science. Okay, there's a subfield, migration sociology or migration anthropology or migration political science. But migration is a case within that broader field. And it's up to you to determine a case of what. Is it a case? So if you would write about, again, in my field, entrepreneurship. So it's clear that there is a connection between the embeddedness of entrepreneurs in social networks and their being successful, or at least capable of maintaining their business. The general sociology. It's the Granovetter quartets, this huge library of literature on social networks, etc., social capital. That's what I'm contributing. And my case happens to be on migrant entrepreneurs. And so and that means that I could easily offer my papers to more general journals. And maybe it's even better to, because you have a different audience, and rather than the same people who already know who you are, etc. So choose a journal, and I have I have 2 pictures: International Migration and City and Community. City and Community is an American urban sociology journal, very American oriented, but it's not a migration journal. It's the more urban studies issues that are being published. When you choose a journal, there is a number of elements that you may want to reflect on. Are you focusing on a general journal, American Journal of Sociology, British Journal of Sociology, or a specialized one, international migration? And that makes sense. Are you looking for a disciplinary or an interdisciplinary journal? American Journal of Sociology, it's sociology. And a bit things on the side, but it's mainly sociology. It's not geography. International migration is everything. It's more thematic. But you can have lawyers who contribute papers, health scientists, geographers, communication experts, etc. And again, the point that you want to make, which type of journal fits that best. Look at the methodological profile. And so if you have a study based on statistics, the city and community would not be the best journal because they're not good at it. The more quantitatively oriented people have their own outlets, but then you need to be there if you want to make your point. Language. So I suppose most of you are Turkish. So writing in Turkish is easiest for you. So and there's nothing wrong with it. But as I said before, it means that only a few people will read it, namely the other people in the room. If you want to reach out, you need to write a different journal, but that requires more time. And also a different way of thinking, because a lot of things that you can take for granted when you write about the situation in Turkey for a Turkish audience, they know a lot of things, so you don't explain that. When you write in an international journal, you need to think about that. You need to reflect on when you say, well, it's where the AK party became influential. What the fuck is the AK party? Nobody knows it. Still possible, but that's another issue. So you need to think about the readership. So are there particular individuals or groups of people or institutions that you want to reach out to? That also influences your choice of journal. What type of journal? A journal that is more theoretically oriented, theory and society? Well, there's nothing more. On the contrary, it's a fantastic journal, but it has an empirical or a paper that is predominantly empirical doesn't fit. So it is a different type of paper. A regionally focused. When I was head of department, one of the associate professor, he claimed to be world famous in Vietnam studies. And I said, what are you saying? I'm world famous in the Vietnam study because he wrote a book published in Vietnam about a fisherman community, 90 citations. I said, for a book published 15 years ago, it's not much. It's not much. And he was quite annoyed, and I was quite provoking. And he had a point, he had no point. He had a point because sometimes you write about very specialized things, and then you have to reach out to that particular field. And that means that you don't get thousands of citations, but so be it. It's a choice. Or you say, well, it's Vietnam, but it could have been in any other thing because I'm addressing a more global, more abstract, theoretical point. That means I could publish it anywhere. I speak to a different type of community. Again, it's a choice. You need to think about what you want. Well, how do you want to be? Do you want to be more activistic? I haven't come across many students or colleagues who would say, I'm not critical. Many say I'm critical. And I always get tired thereof because I think, when you're not critical, you're not an academic. I mean, that's our role, but it means something else. And there is also a claim to better knowledge. And very often I don't see that. It's a claim, and as a claim, it works. But so what's happening on the pitch? We talk about football, but do you score more goals? I don't see it. So why would you mention that? But anyway, that's another thing. Some papers, they call for, say, resistance, or we need to struggle for that, which is understandable. I mean, we all have those emotions. but doesn't really help our understanding. I'm not sure. I mean, I find it a bit cheap to write in that way, instead of just writing how things are. And I think that doesn't mean that you can't be, or you're not allowed to be activistic. I mean, there's nothing wrong. I think there's an activist in all of us, but you need to choose your fields where you display that, when you use it. And personally, but that's another way of looking at it. I think if you want to be activist, the best way to serve that goal is to write a non-activist paper. Because when you write an activist paper, then it's easy for the powers that be to serve as activists. But if you write a more general, but thorough study, it's much more difficult to set it aside. And then you come with your activist block, metro strategy. Let's complete the list. Impact scores. Well, I've had PhD students, and they say, well, I want to publish in the American Journal of Sociology, which is one of the best quoted high impact journals in the field of sociology. That is fantastic. But have you any idea how much work that is and the risk of being rejected? Try something more modern. So when you start playing football, you don't say, I'm fucked because I'm not selected for Real Madrid. Yeah, no, of course not. I mean, you start. Pasha. So you start in a small team, and then you climb up. And when you're real good, you climb up faster. But so be moderate. Yeah. Also think about the time that you need to write it. So one PhD student said, well, the next 3 months I want to write three articles. And it was a serious thing. And I think he doesn't distinguish with writing student papers when you were a master student. You quickly bang out the stuff, and that's fine. And publishing at the Olympic level, but that's what it is. Right? So you're a starting researcher, but you want to submit your paper to a journal where senior people in our fields are evaluating your stuff, and they don't take account of the fact that you're junior. It doesn't matter. You want to be a big boy? Well, then we treat you as a big boy. So there are risks. So that means you need to spend much more time. There needs to be more balance, and it takes time. It slows down the process. Well, furthermore, look at the editors. Who are the editors? If you can't stand the editors, or you think, well, what they write sucks, then try something else. And then finally, there's the look and feel. So, do you feel committed? It's important to also look at what were the previous publications, because many journals like you to reflect or to build on knowledge that was published early in the newspaper. All right, let me go through it quickly. Then writing, and here there's a few other examples. It's just arbitrary. Labor studies, nothing wrong. When you write about migrants in the labor market, what's wrong with publishing in the labor studies journal? Or when you write about urban segregation, housing stuff, or any other journal, not necessarily a migration. But anyway, so when you write, what you always need to do is take the reader by the hand. Don't assume that he or she is stupid, but at the same time, don't assume that he or she knows exactly what you're talking about. Take him, her by the hand and show the reader the steps that you take. And that requires time. It also requires you frequently when you're writing to take a step back and look at your own writing as if it was written by somebody else. Take the reader by the hand. That also means write in a way that's nice. It's inviting. Well, when you read a paper, some papers is as if the writer sort of took a handful of sand and then started writing, and these sentences, it's complicated, you need to reread them. I think this is not complicated work. People say, but it's complicated stuff, it's theory. I think nonsense. It's a writer who didn't spend enough time on explaining her point in a simple way. Anything could be written in a simple way. You need to take an effort to do that. Take the reader by that and be compact. Very often, and that holds for all of us, including me, we have a tendency to sort of write a lot. Because we are trained in the university to jickety jack, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. And I discovered that I'm a lousy reader. I find reading difficult. I get distracted. So I really want to go quickly through a text, and the shorter the better. And shorter texts are usually stronger. They are more compact. The point is quickly made. You're not distracted. Try to be compact. And that too takes an effort. It's easier to write 3 sentences rather than 1 that summarizes the same message. It takes time. But it's a better read. Same holds for the title. I've seen titles, unbelievable. It's half a page. Titles need to be short, compact. They could be witty, but in a way that people understand where it's about. So when the main title is, where do we go to? I have no idea what it is. To the cinema? No. Try to find creatively a title that is catchy, but short at the same time. Keep it short, clear, and to the point. I'm telling you this as one of the editors of International Migration. One of the most difficult things as editors is finding reviewers. For some papers, we approach 20 to 25 reviewers. And I think, well, it could be the topic, the time of the year, I don't know. But sometimes it's also the title of the paper. And some titles are so unattractive, so long, so incomprehensible, that already for that reason, at least I would reject it. I don't think if you're not able to write good titles, how about the rest? Keeping things short is a message for the entire paper. Compact. The introduction, keep it short. So within 1-2 pages, the people should know why he or she is reading it. So what's the point that you want to make? You need to come to the point very quickly. Not with your methodological stuff. Things need to be in the right order. Theory, another issue. Theory is key, because we need to have theory. We are not journalists, we are academics. So there's always theory in it. The question really is, how much theory or what type of theory? Sometimes you think introduction, oh, it's nice, and then theory comes. Hold your horses. It's everything in a very fundamental way is written. And I noticed my reading slows down and I get distracted. And I think that's not good. Because the writer is not able to make her case, the theoretical point, in a clear and sophisticated way. And very often there's too much theory. So again, I did a lot in the field of migrant entrepreneurship. There's so many papers, they try to summarize the entire literature since 1982. So Ivor Light first published his book in 1982, Harvard University Press, and then there was Monaseach and then Watchable and the whole shebang. And I said, well, why am I reading that? But we already know that. We already know that. It's totally irrelevant. make your one point. The so theory is important, but only for as far as it's relevant for your research question. And that means that you need to explain to what theory or to what debates you're speaking to and what your contribution will be. That's enough. And then you can refer to a few other papers that give overviews, but that's all you need. And the rest is rubbish. So compare it with reading the newspaper. You read newspapers? Well, there's a war going on in the Ukraine. Do you read those articles? So just try to do it one day as an exercise. So take a newspaper, a good newspaper that is, and open it and look at the newspaper clips about the war in the Ukraine. Let's say, well, there's, at least in the Netherlands, there's a lot of information, but most of it is repeating what we already know. And so for me, it was not important to have that. Give me 5 more minutes. Yeah. And so it's I lost my point. Oh, you can. Yeah. So what you want to know, there is this dam that had been blown up, and that impacts. So, but that's a shorter. But for the rest, it's well, there were shootings here and shootings there. Well, that's been going on for 1.5 years. So that's not new. And the same holds for the way academics write. So there's a lot that already a lot of people know. So there is no need to spend a lot of time on it. And that means that there's more time for your own finding, which is nicer for the reader. Conclusion, well, of course, you already know that. You repeat the purpose of your paper. So why are you doing it? What have you done? Which questions did you address? What's the theoretical point that you want to demonstrate? Then the results quickly, and then your reflection. That's all it is. No new empirical data. Just bringing the lines that you set out in the paper, in the introduction, and a bit in the main part, bring them together and show what the added value of your paper is. Done. Then I'm almost done. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. So don't try too many things in one article. Keep it simple. It's like football. In the football players, they try to be smart, you know, and the ball behind their legs. Too risky. Don't do that. Just shoot the ball on the goal. I always compare it with reading a newspaper. So anybody who's capable of reading a newspaper, so a good newspaper, they should be able to understand your paper. You say, but it's academic. That's bullshit. It's a matter of writing. But there's theory in it. Bullshit. You can write and explain theory in a simple way and in a way that's accessible. So that should be your aspiration. Yeah, mind to word count. Yeah. So international migration, we have a word count 8,000 words. We get paper 14,000 words. Yeah. So what's the point of sending it? Well, I reject it immediately. Mind to word count. And word count is important, and you include it in your planning. So, because you can plan a paper, you say, well, the introduction, no more than 1,200 words. Okay, can become 1,500, but not 3,000. So many words for methods, for empirical stuff, for the conclusion, and there is a bit left for your references. No need to have 5 pages of references, 2 pages is enough. Select. Mind to word count. Yeah, and this sounds very odd. When you write in English, write correct English. And of course, most of us, maybe all of us, English is not our first language. So we make mistakes. I certainly do. So be it. But we can use a spelling check and then multiple spelling checks. Or before sending it to a journal, we can show it to an expert, to a translator, an editor, whatever. But don't look at the content, just at the text before sending it. Because papers are being rejected because the reviewers say, this language sucks. You can't publish this. Of course, we don't do that. But it reduces the chances of getting published. Avoid popular slogans. Yeah, that's another hobby horse of mine. I'm reading papers in early studies about the tectonic changes. Nothing. We used to say big changes. It sort of suggests that there's something fundamental different. It's not. But if you really sort of try to unpack what is really being said, intersectionality. I think what's new? The term intersectionality, the way it's used, is new, but intersectionality as such is not new. So when I was a PhD student, without using intersectionality, there were lots of people interested in how does race, class, gender, ethnicity, religion, etc. How does it intersect? And so it's you don't contribute something by emphasizing those kind of terms. So I would say avoid that. Keep it simple. Yeah, and then it sounds self-evident. Provide sources. Many people say, "Who are many people?" Or how do you know it are many people? What is many? Do you have a source to corroborate that? Various scholars have claimed that. Who are the various scholars you're talking about? Try to, in each and every sentence, think about references. Of course, you need to take account with the number of references, but you need to find a way to corroborate each and every word that you write in your text. Yeah, and last but not least, do not shun a bit of humor. I find it very important to have a bit of wit in each and every paper. A joke, a nice description. I find it a challenge to construct sentences with words all starting with a V or with a P. You know, and it's totally irrelevant, but it just, as a writer, it makes it funny to write. And I think that as a reader, well, I think it's nice. All right, I think this is sort of it. There's much more to say, and I will say more if you come up with your points. Maybe I forgot things, or I overstated or understated things. Very likely, but we can talk about it. But first, we need to have the caffeine break.
Yeah.
How many hours?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. So what time is it? So it's 3:40.
Yes.
So 3:40 Turkish time. Okay. Thank you very much.